Let's get more on this developing story now with Shahram Akbarzadeh, who joins us from Melbourne. He's a professor of Middle East politics at Deakin University. Really good to have you with us, Professor. Tell us, what is your initial response to what we're seeing now? This Israeli strike on Iran that, as we know, is continuing as we go to air. A number of top Iranian officials killed in these Israeli attacks. What is your first reaction to the events that are currently unfolding?
Thanks for having me, Oscar. I'm not surprised that Israel has taken this step to attack Iran. It was very clear that Israel was unhappy with nuclear talks. In fact, Israel was advising the United States not to pursue nuclear talks, but instead take action against Iran. So it's not a surprise that Israel has done this. The problem with Israeli preemptive action is that Israel is not dragging the United States into another war. Trump came to office with a promise of not starting new wars, but there's a very good chance that the United States would be dragged into another major conflict in the Middle East.
Well, that's right, because we know that before this attack, both Washington and Tehran were meeting in Oman in order to perhaps discuss another nuclear deal. Israel was always opposed to any pact involving Iran. It was against the 2015 nuclear deal, the JCPOA, and Netanyahu was adamantly against the fact that Trump's administration was meeting with the Iranians. In fact, a meeting between the two sides was due to take place on Sunday. Do you believe that this is Israel's, I guess, very brazen way to sabotage those negotiations?
Very clearly, there is no doubt about it. Israel has the aim of this military action was to torpedo nuclear talks and to really put an end to it, because Israel knows Iran is very, very unlikely, almost certain, would not continue nuclear talks while under fire.
Yes, and in terms of the Iranian response, Iran's Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei says that Israel should expect a very forceful retaliation. What might that look like, do you think? And could this raise fears of an all-out war between the two sides?
Well, as you have already covered, Iran and Israel have already exchanged fire last year. So this is not new. It's new in the history of the Islamic Republic of Iran to engage in direct war with Israel, but it's not new since last year. So we've seen it happen. The issue is that Iran has always been trying to minimize the damage that they inflict, to have a contained confrontation with Israel. And that has raised concerns within the Iranian establishment that they should not pull their punches, that they should go all out and show force. Now, with the killing of a number of Iranian commanders, head of the IRGC, and a number of Iranian scientists, as well as military establishments and facilities, I think that pressure will grow more significantly for Iran to respond in force and in kind.
Now, Israel's attack comes less than a day after the UN's nuclear watchdog, the IAEA, declared that Iran was no longer complying with its non-proliferation obligations, the first time in 20 years. It wasn't a unanimous vote by any means. 19 out of the 35 countries on the board of the IAEA supported this resolution, which was apparently backed by the US, UK, France and Germany. In this motion expressed concern that Iran was no longer being fully cooperative with inspections. It also raised concerns about the presence of nuclear material at a number of sites across Iran and fears that perhaps it was secretly enriching uranium. Was this motion by the IAEA perhaps used as cover or a pretext for Israel's attack that we saw in the last few hours?
Discussions at IAEA could have served as the cover for Israeli action, but we know that these kind of military operations require a lot of preparation. So it's not something you can do overnight. There would have been weeks of preparation behind this operation. And I might add, this is not the last of it. There are every indication that Israel will continue with other waves of attack on Iran. This is probably only the first of attacks on Iran.
And Professor, you mentioned the previous bouts of conflict between Iran and Israel. What makes this different, do you think? Will this be another tit-for-tat exchange, or are you worried it could turn into perhaps a wider and more sustained conflict?
I think we have moved past the small-scale contained confrontation between the two. I think we are moving into a phase where there is every chance that conflict can grow out of control and out of hand and have a seriously regional dimension. We know that various militia groups in Iraq who are affiliated with Iran are likely to take action. In fact, they have already taken action last year. They have targeted U.S. assets, which explains why the United States had downsized its personnel only a couple of days ago because they were anticipating such a backlash. So it's not just a question of what Iran is going to do in relation to Israel. There's also a question of various Iranian allied groups and proxies, what they might do against Israel and potentially against the United States.
And Professor, we also know that Donald Trump, ahead of coming into office, had wanted to portray himself as a peacemaker. He didn't believe in any of the conflicts that are currently happening, including the Ukraine war, what was happening in Gaza. And he had really sought to try and bring all of these various sides together in order to end the various conflicts. Now that Israel has essentially escalated this conflict with Iran, what do you anticipate the US line to be? Because as we've been discussing, Washington and Tehran had been meeting together to try and come up with a new deal, something that Israel was steadfastly against. Now that Israel has started this conflict with Iran, what do you expect Washington to do? Do you expect a heavy involvement on their side, or do you believe that Trump will simply allow Israel to do as it pleases?
Very good question, Oscar. That is the million-dollar question, and I think the answer is somewhat obvious. The United States is hostage to its close alliance with Israel. As a result, the United States will do everything possible to defend Israel. In the case of an Iranian barrage of missiles, missile attack in retaliation towards Israel, the US will be there to protect Israel. And by the same token, that action will make the United States assets in the region target for retaliation. So what we see here is that the United States, despite its better judgment, and even though President Trump has aimed and wanted to steer out of conflict and opening up new wars, is actually being pushed into a whole new war. And as I mentioned, the Iranians would be very suspicious of US intentions. Various militia groups allied with Iran would be very, very suspicious and distrustful of what the US is saying. So there's every chance that the US assets would become targets, which would then make a conflict between Iran and the United States very likely. Marco Rubio might be genuine in saying that Israel has taken unilateral action and it wasn't coordinated or assisted by the United States. That may be true, but we are now in a new phase where retaliation by Iran is likely, and the United States will be there on the side of Israel to protect it. And that just means the US is involved in the future conflict.
Okay, Professor Shahram Akbarzadeh, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much again for joining us on the program.